beer, the phone rings. Guy picks it up and says, hello. It says wife on the phone. Hi, honey. And the wife says, dear, I know it's extravagant, but I really want to buy that watch. It's $900, but I really want to buy it. He says, honey, I love you. Buy it. You deserve it. And she says, you're so generous. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Since you're in such a generous mood, I'm kind of thinking we should buy that Lexus. I really think it's too expensive, but I really want it. He says, honey, you deserve it. Buy it. And she says, oh, my gosh, since you're in such a good mood, you know that house we've been looking at? I think I really want it. It's way more expensive. I think we should offer $500,000 for it, maybe $600,000 if they don't take it. And he says, honey, you deserve it. Offer $7,000. That would be great. And she says, oh, my God, I love you. Bye-bye. He hangs up the phone. He says, does anyone know whose cell phone this is? I like that joke. I know, Martin. You like that one? You heard them all? Okay. So I already went through my name and what I do. What I want to share with you now is some research that I did with the peering coordinators over the past 10 years. This one was the question of what happens when you request peering and you get no response? Or what happens when you request peering and you get no as a response? Do you give up? And the seasoned peering coordinators over beers said, no, actually, there are things that we do. And I took on the task of documenting the tricks of the trade of some of the smartest peering coordinators in the world. And the litmus test to make it into this playbook is, have you been able to get peering with someone that you would not have otherwise been able to get peering with? So this is gleaned from some of the smartest people in the world in the peering industry. So the way that I've found is the easiest way to present this is in graphical notation. I've collected about 26 or 27 of these peering tactics. I don't want to bore you with all of them. What I'll do today is share with you maybe about 9 or 10 of some of the more clever maneuvers. And they do a good job, I think, of exercising the definitions that I shared earlier and that Mark shared as he was talking through this stuff. So to present these, I will use a graphical notation just because I'm a visual thinker. So this is kind of the way that I think. And I think it comes across easier as pictures. So in all cases in this peering playbook, do you have a laser pointer? Okay. In all cases, ISP-A, shown as that green circle up there, is the initiator. This is the guy who wants to get peering with ISP, who will always be colored differently over there. So you have an initiator and a target. In all cases, the ISP customers will be the same color as the ISP. So ISP-A will be green and ISP-B will be the same color as brown there. Over on the right, you'll see some of the interactions that I'll try and describe in the playbook. At the very top, what you have there is a P question mark, which is the way I describe, this is a peering request going in. Will you peer with me is the request. And a peering negotiation is shown as this circle here. Likewise, with a transit request, there will be an arc here with a T question mark and the dollar sign showing who would be receiving the compensation for that transit relationship. And then transit negotiations will be shown as this. An equivalent notation that you'll see is like this, where you have a peering routing table showing that the blue routes are being announced to the green ISP-A, and the A is announcing the blue routes to ISP-A, and ISP-B is receiving the green routes announced over this peering relationship. Here we have a paid peering relationship, which is defined as a peering relationship, but with one side getting compensated, typically on a metered rate. And then over here you have a description that's a transit relationship, where ISP-A announces its green routes to ISP-B, and ISP B, being the transit provider, is announcing the entire internet shown as a black blob. And we talked about this. In some of these maneuvers, I'll be talking about traffic flow. And the way I've portrayed traffic flow is as a directed line of various thicknesses. So this would show a relationship where ISP A is sending more traffic to ISP B than ISP B is sending to ISP A, an asymmetric amount of traffic. Lossy or fictional traffic I describe as a dotted line between the two ISPs. And where it's relevant, the particular destination of the announcement, I color code the lines. So the first thing is, the first tactic the ISP said is, if we send a peering request and we get no response, do we give up? No. The seasoned peering coordinators have a whole set of things that they do. They will not just send an email to folks. Here are the top 10 ways that the peering coordinators, the seasoned guys, get a hold of the person to initiate that discussion. The first thing is face-to-face meetings. Even though we work in a networked environment where we need not be in front of each other to communicate, the simple fact of the matter is peering is a interpersonal game. It's a personal relationship type of game. Knowing who the person is and being right in front of them, it just works out. It's far more effective. So conferences like this is the opportunity to find the person who works at that target ISP and have conversations with them. Now you might ask, well, why is that necessary? Well, as it turns out, if you send an email to a target ISP, what's happening behind the scenes at that target ISP is very often the large guys will have a distribution list. Peering at ispdomain.net might have 10 internet engineers going through those emails on a weekly duty rotation. And as it turns out, a lot of times internet engineers don't see internet peering as real engineering. It's not real hardcore. If you're not writing a router, if you're not configuring a router, you're not really doing engineering. Some of these guys see peering as being kind of a secretarial thing to do. Someone else would do it. So what often happens is an email will come in. It's Chris's turn to handle the peering email. And he says, you know, I just don't want to deal with this. And he'll let it drop so next week Karen can get that email. Because the thing about peering requests is they will tend to be persistent. So the next week will come by and the same email will come in to the next person. Face-to-face, that doesn't happen. Face-to-face, you're in front of Chris. You're talking, you're having beers, and it would be very rude for him to just ignore you and walk away. So again, just these seasoned peering coordinators have learned this and have identified face-to-face as really the most effective way of having these interactions. So that would be at operations forums or peering forums, much like this one. Exchange point operations meetings, member meetings in Europe. My role when I was at Equinix was chief technical liaison. So my job was to travel around the world and do peering introductions. To say, Chris, you know, you really ought to meet this other ISP because you have a lot of eyeballs. I know your eyeballs are requesting content from Microsoft. And Christian Nielsen's here. And he's interested in getting better connectivity in Africa. You guys should talk. So my job was to facilitate that interconnection. So if you have an exchange point relationship, if you work or if you have a presence at an exchange point, there will very often be that kind of liaison person whose job it is to facilitate that interaction. The standard electronic email using peering at ispdomain.net is, in fact, one of the ways that you would do it. Martin mentioned PeeringDB as a mechanism to send email. A lot of folks said actually doing a Google search for ASN and then put in the number and then contact, using those keywords actually will bring up contact information for that person. A lot of times I found it provides pointers into PeeringDB as a way of getting access in there. The target sales force is sometimes a mechanism in. The target knock is sometimes used as a way of finding out who the current contact is. And here's one that the peering coordinators don't like me talking about, but it's a simple fact. If you go in the front door with an email to peering@ispdomain.net, like I said, it goes through the duty cycle and may or may not get answered. But if you know the email of a specific contact within that company, maybe a peering coordinator that you met at one of these forums, if you get their business card, you can send email directly to them. If you have that personal relationship, that ends up being far more effective than an email just off to that list. And then associated with that is, as a tactic, if you strategically decide you want to get a lot of peering sessions, I would suggest that you go to every peering conference that you can. Chances are good you'll bump into the targets that you want to meet, have that relationship, find out from them and from their peers what your target is looking for in a peer. Are they responsive to email? Do you have their contact information? Where are they peering, and what are the things to say? And one of the things I do is I advise folks what are the things not to say. And I'll give you a specific example. Are you familiar with Netflix? One of the things Netflix, when they were in the peering space, was looking at doing was peering with the cable companies. But one of the early models was they were considering maybe we would have some set-top boxes. And as it turns out, if you say to a cable company the words set-top box, they get threatened because they want to own that customer relationship. So those words, set-top box, will immediately terminate the conversation if you want to peer with the cable companies. So anyway, these are the sorts of things that you'll do when you go on intelligence gathering missions to these operations conferences. Okay, so tactic number 2, besides the extended direct approach, tactic number 2 is called transit with peering migration. And here's how that works. You go to a target ISP, let's say Freddie's network. And let's assume that Freddie is a Tier 1 ISP or a large Tier 2 ISP, and you want to peer with them. And you know in advance that they are a very, very selective peer. You've learned from the field by talking to folks that they really don't want to peer with very many folks. So what you do is you say, Freddie, I want to peer with you, but what I would really like...
Go away.
Freddie says go away right away. But wait a minute. I'm going to assume that you're the peering coordinator. I'm going to assume that Karen next to you is the salesperson. And as it turns out...
Talk to her.
Exactly right. As it turns out, salespeople are far more willing to return phone calls than peering coordinators are. So Karen, how are you doing? I am really excited to maybe purchase some transit from you. And maybe this will happen towards the end of the quarter where I know you need to have that push. And we'll talk, and I'll say, well, I want to peer as well. So what I want to do is buy transit from you with the idea that we contractually stipulate the conditions where I will convert that into a peering relationship.